From childhood days, I've always wanted to visit the Pacific Northwest, where nature in all her grandeur has ever beckoned the lover of the great outdoors. As we make our way into this region, over splendid highways which follow the paths blazed by the struggling pioneers, we realize that here is a natural playground of magnificent mountains, alluring rivers, of national parks and forests, abounding with protected wildlife. Here we are impelled to pause, to lift up our eyes to the eternal hills, to draw deep inspiration from the ever-flowing wells of nature. We are at once impressed by the vastness of magnificent stands of virgin timber. We had heard of the great lumber industry of the Northwest and of the important part which it plays in furnishing the materials not only for our homes, but also for an ever-increasing variety of products to foster new occupations and trade. We'd also heard of the loggers, celebrated picturesquely in song and story as mighty men who were said to swing their axes, to eat, to fight, or to play with an equally roaring and gusty abandon. Naturally, we were curious about loggers. Here at the outset of our visit to the timberlands of Washington, we find a logger, and he is a hearty man. At his specialty, he is tops. This artist who carves with a two-edged axe, honed like a razor, is known as the high climber. After the timber cruisers have marked out an area to be cut, certain few trees are selected which are left standing all through the logging operation. It is the high climber's job to trim off the branches and top to make a spar to which tremendously strong cables will be attached. The high climber has a lot of confidence in his rope, the only thing which saves him from a 200-foot drop. When the 60-foot top of the tree falls, he'll have to hang on for dear life. We were not in the forest area long before we began to hear the phrase, timber is a crop. It struck us a bit odd at first because the word crop had denoted knee-high things like alfalfa and oats. It was a little startling to swing our mind onto a crop which grows for centuries and grows hundreds of feet high. But we found that trees, like any other growing thing, reach maturity and eventually decay and die. This tree looked pretty good standing there alongside other trees of equal size and age, but its core was rotten, and the wood remaining was not worth hauling to the mill. It should have been harvested 100 years ago to be of best value for lumber. Here we find more specialists, a pair of fallers. And incidentally, you don't fell a tree, you fall it, or you're out of step with the lingo of the woods. Falling a tree which weighs perhaps 60 tons between other 60-ton trees with as little damage as possible does call for some figuring. But it all seems very casual. The fallers glance at the surroundings and at their tree and just go to it with little ado. Maybe they have a secret sign language, but I couldn't get it. I heard no words spoken as to where to start the undercut or when to stop cutting and begin sawing. But it all seemed to go through just like clockwork. Apparently, at just the right second, the fallers yank out their tools and dash to the nearest exit, and away she goes with a roar and a wallop. At the steam skidder, we heard more picturesque language of the woods. Down in the canyon, choker setters and hook tenders fastened the logs to the cables. The whistle punk gave the signal, and up at the landing, skidder levermen, chasers, and loaders completed the job of yarding the logs and loading them onto cars. When you think that a location like this is perhaps a half-mile higher than the headquarters camp and as much as 30 miles away in a remote fold of the mountain slopes, one can realize the tough job of building railroads to reach the stands of timber. Sometime, if you want to ride on the crookedest railroads in the world, visit the spur tracks which spread like a network through the timber country to extend far back into the wilderness. From these heights, the heavy loads wind always downward from the mountains to the sea. Here, boom men sort the fir, hemlock, spruce, and cedar to be rafted to the mills. Because several varieties grow together in the same forests, it is impractical to take out only the kind most in demand. It's necessary to cut all varieties in a given area, and by continuous research, develop further uses for each species. When a forest giant starts into the sawmill, we find that it's only the beginning of a vast number of processes from which our timber emerges in 1,000 different shapes, sizes, and forms. Just as chemists are finding new industrial uses for the farmer's beans, corn, cotton, and other crops, likewise, many of the best scientific minds are thinking of new ways to utilize more of the timber with less waste. Only recently, hemlock was a stepchild among Western lumbers. Now, most of it goes to the pulp mills to supply the paper and rayon industries. We already have compressed fuel made from sawmill waste, and it is now possible to use the smaller units of wood, reformed with chemicals into molded shapes for panels, tiles, acoustic boards, and finished materials of ever-increasing variety. Timber is a crop, and good old Mother Nature takes care of the reseeding. The men in the management of the lumber industry are trying to aid these natural processes by leaving big patches of trees in areas which they are logging, especially on the tops or sides of mountains where winds will scatter seeds. Look among the stumps of any such area, and you'll find in just a few seasons the sturdy little seedlings springing up, often 50,000 to the acre. That is why, if fires can be kept out of the newly seeded areas, it is possible to cut no more lumber than grows each year. How bountifully nature in the Northwest takes care of her crop, making a natural storehouse of enormous recurring wealth. During an endless cycle of clouds and sunshine, rain and snow, storing up moisture for the whole year, young seedlings can hardly help but grow. Look along any pretty stream, or off the highway where in former years the loggers have hewed their timber, and you will find fir and hemlock, cedar and spruce, thrusting their graceful tips up into the sunshine. Again and again the seasons pass over these growing trees, and over the rich soil out of which our forests of tomorrow take root. Other seasons pass, and once again straight columns of timber begin to form into fine stands of second growth, like the deep forests into which the first spot known.